Consumer behavior, consumers are much more discerning than they were. They're also a lot more e-com and web savvy. They're doing a lot of shopping around. They're waiting for the best price. They are now also returning to stores. So we definitely have to track the customer right through to the store, are able to capture the customer through email or through their phone number in stores and track those purchases. We're using the same tool to capture funds online as we are in stores.
Welcome to the Ecommerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives, a podcast by Noibu, where we explore the elite strategies and cutting-edge insights with our expert guests. Get ready to propel your e-commerce business to the next level.
Welcome to another episode of the Ecommerce Toolbox Experts Perspective. Joining us today, we got Tony. Tony's calling in from Montreal. I'm down the road in Ottawa. So Tony has quite the career. He's now at Bouclair, which I remember going to my mom when I was growing up because I grew up in Quebec, where they're originally from. But he has a ton of experience in home furnishing, working at businesses like Structube, even on the agency side. So really excited for today's interview. Welcome, Tony.
Hey, thanks very much. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. I think I kind of alluded to it earlier in my intro, but you have quite the background kind of stemming from graphic design to working as an operator in e-com, agency, and now back. So maybe talk to us a bit about your background and how you ended up in the role that you're in today, leading e-com for Bouclair.
I guess you did kind of allude to it. I did work in graphic design. I actually went to university for design and studied both 3D and 2D design. I guess growing up, even in high school, I was really into graphic design and making websites. So it's quite a while ago in the 90s. So when I moved to Montreal, I actually got into search, working as a UX designer for a search company. This is about a year or so before Google. So Montreal was kind of a hotspot for startups, for tech startups back then. And as a teenager, I was able to get a job working at one of these places and kind of, I guess, learned a lot about design and UX for the internet, for websites, and even making banner ads, emails, all of this stuff. Back then, the file sizes were a lot smaller. So yeah, I definitely had to learn fast. When I completed my degree in design, I actually was working as a freelancer, designing a lot of websites, working as a photographer too. And I ended up working at an e-commerce company selling jewelry online. They were actually doing quite well at the time. And that's, I guess, where I learned a lot about e-commerce. That would have been back in 2002. So this is when there were no Magentos or Shopifys or anything like that. Everything was homemade. I guess this was right after the crash of the late 90s, early 2000s. So build your own computer type environments and work on like a door in a basement. What's funny though is back then, because this is kind of, I guess, war stories, everything was done on MSN Messenger. My teammates were in Los Angeles, Toronto, kind of all over the place. And it was kind of foreshadowing for, I guess, what we experienced through COVID. Like all of my meetings were online and all of my work was done remote. And I like to think of e-com as kind of an industry that, yes, it does change, but we still do a lot of the stuff we did back then. We're still sending emails, we're still updating the homepage, and we're still optimizing product pages, optimizing search on site. I feel like in the last 22 years, from my perspective, not a lot has changed, to be honest.
That's funny. And my second question is going to dive into how did you make the pivot from graphic design to e-commerce, like more tactically, because I think we were chatting about it before the show, but it's not like back in early 2000s, late 90s, you could actually study e-commerce. And a podcast that I did with James Connell, who I'm sure you know, who was at Roots for 20 plus years, he mentioned that like he literally applied for a part-time job at Roots, and this is on the podcast. And then he somehow ended up in the head office. And then one day they're like, oh, we need to do a website. Who wants to work on this and get a bit of experience? So yeah, maybe talk to us a bit about like how you actually ended up in that role and how you made that transition from graphics to actually running e-com.
I guess it wasn't a linear path, like you mentioned. I was working for myself, temporarily ran a magazine for a while. And then I got into retail as I was replacing someone who was on sick leave in a marketing role. And I basically ended up just saying, oh, I'd worked in ecom before, or actually, I think at that side, we didn't even have a transactional site, but ended up getting into retail and then kind of moving my way up, eventually working at Structube, which at the time was not nearly as big as they are today. And I guess I was able to use a bit of my insight into my previous roles at these technology companies in ecom to take a stab at it and just work on the first ecom site for that brand. And coming into it, that would have been like almost 10 years later, the technology had changed and we were able to work with Magento, I think, for the first iteration of that site. And a lot had changed in the sense of not in the mechanics of the site, but how quick you can go to market and how few people you would need to get that going too.
Makes sense. And part of what made me really excited for today's interview is that you have experience in the home decor space pre and post COVID, and now in kind of that reset period. So pre COVID, you have these large considered purchases that are thousands of dollars that are infrequent, like buying a sofa or things like that. And then there was obviously a consumer behavior change during COVID. People had to get comfortable actually procuring these things online way more than before. So I guess my first question is, how did that kind of store closure, especially in Canada and markets like Canada, where they were a bit maybe stricter than the US and parts of Europe, how did COVID really impact the home decor purchase cycle, in your opinion? And what did that look like before and after? And what do you think that long-term actually looks like? Whereas like maybe it's like a fusion of both moving forward, but I'm curious because I think you're in a unique position to be able to answer that.
So when COVID hit, I was actually working as an e-commerce consultant and kind of working for many different brands. So everybody was kind of in panic mode, not knowing what was going on. Home decor was affected in a very positive way during that time, in that people working from home suddenly realizing that they're going to be there for a while and they might as well make their space as beautiful as possible, especially having like a window into everybody else's home a few times a day as you go into these meetings. So it was one of those sectors, kind of like recreational things like acquire something like a kayak or a paddleboard or anything like that. It was very difficult. So it was one of those items or one of those parts of the economy that was positively affected. And the sales kind of went through the roof. So the big challenges during that time was definitely on supply chain, delivery, getting the products to the customer and being able to absorb some of that demand. And that actually lasted quite a long time. Right now, we're kind of, I guess, on our way out of that trend for a lot of these sectors. So demand is now reduced. And now we find ourselves in an environment where you have to put your marketing cap on and be very clever to get those people that are on the market right now looking for these products, because it's not everyone like it was a couple of years ago.
Yeah. So this is going to tie into how you're placing your bets as an ecom manager, because you're kind of like a portfolio manager of cash. You can invest in technology, you can invest in marketing, you could add traffic, you can invest in certain things to drive the outcome, which is really revenue. When you're looking at the current landscape right now, obviously, I'm assuming the traffic on your website's much higher than pre-COVID. I'm assuming the conversion rates probably dipped a little bit from the peak. So as you're looking at all of this landscape right now, how do you think the average consumer is purchasing? Do you think they're starting online and then finishing in store? If so, how are you tracking that? And like, how are you maximizing effectively every session right now? I'm curious, like a bit tactically.
You really hit the nail on the head there. We are overanalyzing all of these behaviors because, as you've accurately noted, the conversion rates have dipped a bit. We found the consumer behavior, consumers are much more discerning than they were. They're also a lot more e-com and web savvy. So like having lived through kind of a crash course for many people on how to buy online, they are now experts, especially for big ticket items, not just buying the first thing they see, or they're doing a lot of shopping around. They're waiting for the best price. They are now also returning to stores. So we definitely have to track the customer right through to the store. We do this actually really well. We are able to capture the customer through email or through their phone number in stores and track those purchases. We're using the same tool to capture funds online as we are in stores. We're using things like Klarna, where we allow people to pay in multiple payments because times are tough and people don't have, or they don't feel like they have the same type of buying power they had before. But we are definitely micro focusing on every move of the consumer to see how can we better serve them. Like, do we need to put more videos on each one of the PDPs? They're definitely pre-making baskets online and then going into store, completing their transactions. Some of the things we can do is we have kind of like an endless aisle feature where the people in store will help them to add to their cart, to increase the UPT of every transaction. So it's definitely a challenging time. And these tools that we're using, instead of making them go to the cash, we've got an iPad that can travel around the store with the customer. Those transactions, we see them from the e-com team. We share that information with the store team. So it's kind of an all hands on deck, omni-channel experience. And it's a lot harder than it was the last couple of years, that's for sure. But as a marketer and e-commerce operator, it's definitely a lot of fun. I really enjoy these tough problems.
How do you see the kind of traditional VP of e-com's KPIs have changed kind of pre-COVID, post-COVID, especially in considered purchases or home decor space? Like, was it more driving traffic, volume at the beginning, and now it was more conversion focused? Like, what do you think the right KPI mix is? Because like, it's the whole attribution game. We saw it too as we got bigger. Someone talks to us at an event, they email us, the sales team cold called them, like, who booked the lead? So curious how you guys are looking at that and how do you have the right KPI mix?
Kailin, it's like you're actually here at our office challenging, because these are the exact type of questions that we are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So I think one of the things like that we're looking at, because we're actually going through a branding exercise right now, basically like right now we're doing more top of funnel type of acquisition marketing. In the last couple of years, it's been very much focused on ROAS, return on ad spend, throughout, and really like a lot of these bottom funnel kind of tactics. There have been so many consumers on the sites, and it's really been a winning formula for the team. I actually just joined a couple months ago, so I'm pretty new here, but we are definitely going after kind of an acquisition model now. So I look at net new users on the site. I'm looking at geography too. Bouclair is a brand that's most known in Quebec and not so much in the other provinces. So I'm definitely trying to get people interested from different parts of Canada. I'm looking at time on site, both positive and negative way. So trying to figure out, are they finding the product they're looking for? Are they spending too much time on, like on the site? Or are they just hitting the homepage and leaving? Like, what am I considering a bounce? As you feed the funnel, these are all kind of metrics that you want to look at. Like, am I getting the right traffic on the site? Is my male-female mix off? Like, I've almost an entirely female audience right now. I think also like we're looking at how many people are going to our stores. What is the conversion rate in our stores? How is that affected by these new visitors that I'm using traditional media to get to? I don't know if there is a certain KPI mix that is right for retailers post-COVID, but I think it's definitely not ROAS. I don't think that's the be all. And I think one thing that I'm very skeptical of is attribution models. And if you're optimizing for ROAS, whoever is helping you do that, unless it's your own internal teams, suddenly all the metrics are being converted into like, oh, well, our advertising's working. It's just like, yeah, but my revenue is not going up. So it's just like all you've managed to do is attribute more sales to this channel of digital marketing. So I find that it's really important to kind of pick and choose different KPIs that kind of show a different story. And I think it is more about kind of new user acquisition, at least for me right now. That's what I'm looking at.
Makes sense. When you look at KPIs, you guys are omni-channel. Like you mentioned, you have a bunch of stores in Quebec. I know you have a couple in Ontario. In provinces and territories or in states, if the people that are listening in the US, that you sell and ship to online, but don't have any brick and mortar stores, do you guys have different KPIs? Whereas like in those states, like it might make sense to be more conversion focused, whereas it might make sense to be more user focused in an area that everyone has a store down the street. Curious how you look at that.
We actually ship from store. We actually use DoorDash, and it is remarkably effective. When I started at Bouclair, I bought a few things from my store. I was able to pay with Apple Pay, one-click transaction. The product showed up in my house the same day. And I think the SLA on the site was like 5 to 7 days. I was like, okay, this is crazy. I mean, I was very impressed. I think Bouclair, what we've managed to do over time is actually, and this is probably because of COVID, we're able to ship, like we were able to find a solution to get the shipping exactly right for the customer. And whether they want to pick it up in store or have it shipped right to their home. I think, to go back to your question, I definitely do use different metrics for places where we don't have stores because we offer pickup in store. And that was by far the most popular method that our customers were using. However, as we migrate away from the mentality that was kind of covered during the pandemic, ship to home is now becoming more and more popular for our customers, and it's allowing us to cover more ground. There are a lot of areas that we don't cover with our stores, and e-com sales are kind of a great way to figure out where should I have more stores. So definitely tracking those metrics for that. What type of shipping solutions do I need to use to get to those areas where people are interested in my products? I think casting a wide net and then professionalizing my offering around the customers where they live is the way I like to operate. And that's what we're trying to do here. In some of my past roles, I definitely worked with different geographies, different countries, and also in the US. And I find that every country is unique. The US, the States are all like their own countries. It's insane trying to do digital marketing out there. It is very challenging. And however, the shipping game out there is a lot better than we have here in Canada. I mean, getting a package from Montreal to California is actually faster than getting it out to Vancouver. But I mean, yeah, I definitely love checking out all of the geodata that I'm seeing from visits, conversion rate. Are my shipping options right for all those geographies? Do I need to add some? Do I need to add some postal codes? These are all things that we're looking at on a weekly basis.
Cool. As we look to get towards the last question, and as we wrap up, Tony, I'm curious, looking over the next 12, 18 months, given you guys are in home decor space, high interest rates, the macro environment, how are you looking at placing your bets? Are you looking at conversion rate optimization and investing in technology and capitalizing on your existing user base that was acquired during COVID before that? Or are you looking at more so investing in like marketing to effectively grow the user base? How do you think, given the positioning of the environment and the macro environment and your business, how are you looking at those investments?
We consider ourselves a retailer first and a technology company second. So we're definitely not a technology company, but we do definitely have a really qualified tech-focused, data-focused team. So we are going to be making some investments in technology, that's for sure. We're switching up our e-com platform or not. Like, we're definitely going to make some changes there, and we're going to be switching up the marketing mix a little bit to adapt to the climate for sure, reaching out, trying to find new markets, new users, new channels, new digital channels. Definitely want to ramp up traffic to our own site and potentially to other channels. We're getting into B2B. And I guess the way that we make decisions is we look at the data and we like to try things and experiment. We have a very innovative team here. And although it is a challenging time and interest rates, all that stuff, very unpredictable kind of economy, we're very much optimistic about the future. And we think there's a lot of, I guess, low-hanging fruit in our marketing offering and our tech stack that we can definitely drive a lot more traffic and sales through our stores and through our online offering.
Awesome. Well, Tony, it's been a pleasure. Wanted to thank you so much for your time. It was a great episode and looking forward to chatting again.
Thanks a lot, Kailin. I really enjoyed it.
The Ecommerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives is brought to you by Noibu. To find out more about Noibu and how we can help you debug your e-commerce site and rocket your revenue, visit www.noibu.com. That's Noibu.com. And then make sure to search for the Ecommerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found, and click subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Noibu, thanks for listening.